then they have to contribute because they are actively contributing to research. They're not just subjects, but they're participants.
Patients are the experts in their own disease, and we have, be it as a clinician, a scientist, industry, me in a patient organization, we have so much to learn from that perspective.
Good morning and good afternoon. A warm welcome to our wonderful two guests and anyone watching or listening to the new ProQR Talks series. My name's Andy Bolan. I'm the Associate Director for Patient and Medical Community Engagement at ProQR and the lucky host today. Through these short conversations, we're aiming to break down some of the tougher topics, which are always a challenge to communicate. But firstly, let me introduce my guests. We have the wonderful Laura Brady in Ireland and the fantastic Francesca Diodati in Italy. Laura, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you. It's a nice sunny day in Ireland, so we're going to take that and embrace some sunshine for the weekend.
Oh, wonderful. And Francesca, how are you? How is Italy?
Hi, everybody. I'm fine, thank you. I'm great. I mean, we're about to finish our 7th week of lockdown, and things are opening up a little bit next Monday, so I feel good about that.
Yeah, the slow integration back. Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Right, well, let's get to it. Welcome to all of you. This is Why is the Patient Perspective in Research Important? Featuring Francesca Diodati and Laura Brady. Francesca is based in Parma, Italy, majored in simultaneous interpreting, but has been working at the University Hospital of Parma for 20 years. 15 of which have been in the Research and Innovation Unit. She has a master's in research methodology and works as an information specialist, contributing to the writing of study protocols and scientific publications. She says that she is dedicated to raising awareness on the importance of research, both for personal and professional reasons. Laura Brady from Ireland has always been interested in science and the role it plays in understanding disease and developing of therapies. She completed a degree in biochemistry at Trinity College Dublin, followed by a PhD in neuroscience. She works closely with the clinical and academic community as part of the Target 5000 program, which provides a clinical and genetic diagnosis to anyone in Ireland with an inherited retinal degeneration. Laura herself recognizes the importance of public and patient involvement in research and regularly supports people and families living with vision loss through education and empowerment. Well, welcome both of you. We'll jump straight in. Laura, maybe I can come to you first. Yeah. With patients in research. What does the patient perspective in research mean to you?
So I believe that the patient perspective should be viewed as a way of enhancing or supporting research. So, for example, we may have a question or an approach, a scientific or a clinical approach or question that is scientifically relevant, but is it actually relevant from the patient perspective? And I think no one knows their condition better than the person who's actually living with that condition on a day-to-day basis. So patients are the experts in their own disease, and we have, be it as a clinician, a scientist, industry, me in a patient organization, we have so much to learn from that perspective. You know, the impact it has on day-to-day, the needs, the anxieties, the expectations around a therapy, priorities in research. And so I think that by working and incorporating that perspective in research will lead to higher quality, greater impact and more relevant outcomes. And I sit on a board in Ireland. It's an umbrella organisation called Health Research Charities Ireland. And it's for research organisations that support research into all disease areas. And I often come across the phrase, nothing about us without us. And I really think that is very true. You know, we are developing therapies for people, and who better to have direct and inform and contribute towards that process, but the person themselves.
Absolutely. And I guess, Francesca, we come to you. What does it mean to you in terms of?
Well, I feel like I'm in a privileged position about this topic because I am a patient. I have a retinal disease, so I'm visually impaired, and from birth. but I also work in research myself. And so I can look at the issue from both sides. And I think that the term that we use now in research is participants. We say that patients are trial participants. So that made me think, because a participant is someone who is taking part in something. And that means that the patient has to obviously follow the rules of research. So they have to know what these rules are, but then they have to contribute, because they are actively contributing to research. They're not just subjects, but they're participants. And another thing is that research has shown that priorities for patients are different, sometimes very different from the priorities that the clinicians have, the researchers have. So when designing, patient involvement should begin right from the start, from the research questions. So what is important for patients, first of all, and then in study design, what designs are acceptable to patients, and all through the publications results must be published also in a form that is accessible to patients. So patients must contribute to that as well, to explain their fellow patients, fellow citizens, what the research was. So I think it's a two-way partnership. Researchers give a lot to patients. Patients benefit from research, but patients must contribute to research as like a duty, I would say, and as a right.
Absolutely. And I guess that nicely moves on to kind of the next question, which is, you've emphasized the importance, Francesca, there of researchers and clinicians, or even companies doing research, to understand why patients choose to be in trials. What motivates them. Can you talk a little bit about, how you maybe at Palm University motivate people to take part in clinical trials?
We part of what we do is actually at the Research and Innovation Unit is to inform the public and research and patients, about to raise awareness of what research is. The problem with recruitment target is a very important issue. Sometimes I think half of the trials fail to achieve, or something like that, to achieve recruitment target. And that was really surprising to me, because when I was growing up, I thought, if there's a clinical trial for my condition, I would take part, and without even asking what it is. But that's my attitude. But it's not the same for everybody. And speaking to people who have my condition or different conditions, they say, especially probably if they're not life-threatening, obviously, they say, I wouldn't take part in research because I'm afraid that I would be like a guinea pig, or so what we need to do is to raise awareness about the importance of research, and to tackle, to discuss with them the fears that they might have. And we have these meetings that we organize, we coordinate these meetings open to the public with the clinicians and the researchers, who explain to participants. Everybody can join, can come. We explain what research is and what their particular research, they are doing in their wards, at the hospital. So it has two purposes: to raise awareness about research, to teach them what research is like, and also to inform them about the opportunities that there are there. Because sometimes, even if a person is motivated to participate in a study, they might not know that there is a study just for them.
Yeah,
and that was really my personal experience as well.
And that's you pick up a fantastic point. And actually, there can be a lot of misunderstanding around and kind of fear when it comes to clinical trials. And Laura, I guess I'll come to you with to follow up on that and say, kind of, what are the key things to communicate around clinical trials, make sure that participants feel, I guess, involved, but also to take away that kind of fear?
So clinical trials, like they're an incredibly complex process. So I think when we're talking about communicating about clinical trials, we have to work off the assumption that a person has no knowledge of what a clinical trial is. So how a clinical trial is conducted, what is the objective of a clinical trial. So I think we have to go back to the very, very basics and share that information in a way that is easy to understand. So remove all the medical jargon and have it in very plain, simple language that is also accessible. And by accessible, I mean that it is accessible across all various different types of technical platforms, be it someone who's using screen readers or magnifiers or audio, speech to text, text to speech, so that it is accessible across all platforms, so that the first barrier isn't accessibility to information. And then I think really it's educating the community around the different stages and phases of a clinical trial, and what the purpose of each phase is, how long does it take, but also being transparent, like what are the risks in taking part in a clinical trial? Are there any anticipated side effects? A huge fear that I've come across is that people are afraid that to take part in case they fall under the sham arm, or that they fall under the placebo. And, you know, taking part in a clinical trial is quite burdensome, you know, and you have to take into consideration the burden on the participant, but not just the participant, their family and their carers. So it's acknowledging that this is a huge decision for an individual, and that, you know, there's full transparency and all the information is there. So for example, we know unfortunately that not all clinical trials progress from phase 1 to phase 3. Some clinical trials don't reach as far as phase 3. And so what happens to that participant? So what happens if they take part in phase 1, it doesn't progress to phase 2, they've been receiving an intervention, they feel they have some personal benefit, what happens then? So I think there's huge amount of work that can be done. And by involving people in these discussions, you know, we can come up with new ways, new strategies, new communication tools, and collaboratively co-design new information and accessibility, access to accessible and easy to understand information.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, the importance of actually answering the questions that people might have themselves, and not the questions that we think as being part of the research community they might want to know. So Francesca, can I come to you just to follow that up, and the importance of that communication aligned with people who might not have PhDs? You know, what is the importance of that, getting to that level?
Yeah, it's very important. We don't know. I mean, patients can be can have PhDs. They can be doctors, but they can also be lower education, lower health literacy, and we have to reach them all. So communications must not be too simple. I mean, we don't have to treat them like they cannot understand. It's just the language that has to be different, and also, make them understand why placebo is used. And the problem with placebo, I mean, it has happened to me personally. I am very determined to take part in research, but when I think I might get a placebo, I get like, okay, it's very very committing. I mean, to take part in a trial, it's not just, okay, I'll take a pill. I mean, you have to take part in different exams every month or every week or whatever. And so it's very demanding. So that's the problem. So we have to, when we're designing, that's something different though, maybe, that I'm talking about.
No,
because
but
that's about designing a clinical trial.
Yeah, no, I think it's extremely important. You know, actually understanding this level. Do you think getting down to that kind of, or having that participant or patient input can further help kind of like the way to maybe designing trials differently, to make them more attractive? Or have you had any experience of that, Francesca?
No, I've never worked as a patient in working on a protocol. But of course, we have to listen to patient opinions. If they said they wouldn't find sham acceptable, for example, I mean, that has to be taken into account. Of course, there are methodological reasons why sham is used, but when it can be avoided, it should be avoided. I think, as a patient, not as a researcher or someone who works in research.
Yeah, it's a really strong point. So I guess, Laura, I'll come to you. You know, to kind of making the patient researcher partnership kind of work even better. Do you think it's important that trial administrators understand the impact of that kind of the sham position, or, you know, the experiences they felt in failed trials previously?
Absolutely, because, you know, this, as Francesca said, it is a huge commitment on the part of the patient to participate in a clinical trial. And sometimes it even involves people traveling to a foreign country, or where the language isn't their main language. And it's a huge commitment, time commitment, emotional commitment. And there will be huge anxiety. And so I really think it is important to recognize that a lot will come up for participants, and maybe what needs to be done in parallel is that participants know where to go for supports during the process, because, you know, it may bring up a lot. It's a lot for them and their families, but having that communication, and I think I've met a couple of the trial administrators, and they're very open and engaged, because ultimately they're going to be having the relationship through, they're also on the journey with the participant. And so to have that and cross conversation between the two, I think it's only going to enhance the experience for the participant, and again ultimately will improve, let's say, the next stage of a clinical trial, because we're always learning. Clinical trials are still research studies, and, you know, we learn from each clinical trial how to improve if we were to do it all over again. And so I do think it is important to have that.
Interesting. Yeah, very interesting.
Can I come to you just to follow that up?
Yeah, we just asked earlier, we wondered, why would people take part in research? And I think that's a crucial question, because we all know that we say that patients should be reminded, and it's also written in the informed consent, you know, that they might not get benefit out of the trial, and that must be said. But we know that patients hope somehow to get something out of the trial, to get a benefit for their own health. And so even if they do it for a selfless reason, like to help future generations, to further research, there's that little bit of hope. Maybe they don't even admit it to themselves, but there's that hope that their health might improve with the trial. So if they are told that they should go through all the trouble and maybe, you know, go abroad, like Laura said, and to get sham, to receive placebo, that might be very discouraging. And they may say, okay, no, I'm not going through the trouble, but not because they're selfish, just because they have problems of their own, they have a job, or they have health issues. So that's even more demanding.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So I guess kind of we've only got a few more minutes left, but Laura, I'll come to you. Just on a positive note, if there was one thing that you could change tomorrow in research or how it's conducted to implement that patient perspective, what would it be?
Well, we're definitely, I mean, we're clearly moving into an era of that's focused around patient-centered medicine. And also we are now recognizing that patients are not just seen as sources of data. You know, they're not just data tools. Patients can actually be protagonists in this whole process. And back to what Francesca said, if I could change one thing, it would be embed patient perspective, not add. Don't add patient perspective in the middle or at the end. Embed it at the very, very beginning. And can I add one more thing if I could change?
Yeah, please, yeah.
Sorry, because one's not enough. So if I could change another thing, and it is
two
changing.
things.
And it is changing. It is the embedding of patient-reported outcome measures in clinical trials. And so capturing what is relevant to the patient. Obviously, we have to capture what is clinically relevant and scientifically relevant, but capturing what is relevant to the patient. So is that improvement in quality of life? Is that improvement in functional vision?
Yes,
is that
exactly.
greater confidence? And to capture those outcomes independent of a clinical interpretation. And I really think that by embedding all of this in the process, we're going to expedite and we're going to get to the end, get to the treatment quicker than if we were not to embed all of these perspectives.
Excellent. And so Francesca, I come to you with the same question. I mean, if there was something, I mean, we had one or two there, but I mean, if there was, there are things that you think we could do tomorrow, either in clinical trial design that would, you know, really improve kind of the patient perspective, what would it be?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with what Laura said. Embed their perspective from the start, from the writing of the protocol, and also right from the research question, I would say, and also for the methodology. Would that be acceptable to you? And also in ethics committees, there should be more involvement of patient involvement, because at the ethics committee level, you can still do that. You can still change some things that you might feel they're not acceptable. Of course, a patient is not a scientist. So both, they're both right. I mean, there's no right or wrong, but the patient must be considered just like, not like an added value, like Laura said, but it's a component, member of the team. Just like there is a research, there's a clinician, there is a biologist, there's a methodologist, a statistician. They all must be involved from the start. I mean, like a statistician, you can involve a statistician afterwards when it's all done. You call them, can you do that calculation for me? Or they have to be involved right from the start. And that same is true for patients, I think. Because then if a patient knows that their protocol that they're taking part in was reviewed by an ethics committee and written by a team that included patients, that may make them feel them more confident about taking part in a trial, I think.
Absolutely. So I guess
even if it was not them.
Yeah, no, it's a really, really strong point. And I think, you know, as we come to a close, I'll thank you both for the wonderful discussion we've had. But I just want you to take maybe 2 minutes to either just outline what you took away from today, or any concluding remarks. And Francesca, can I start with you?
Yeah, I thank you for allowing me to join, or inviting me to join this very interesting discussion. It's like I said, it's a very important issue for me personally, as well as professionally, but especially personally. And yeah, I think Laura and I are on the same level, and I think that the issues that we see are the same all over the world. And I'm very happy to see that patient involvement is valued more and more. They're involved in writing of guidelines. They're involved in writing of protocols more and more. It's also written in the protocol. Like I've been seeing protocols nowadays about COVID-19, and I read in one that there's sends a statement that patients were not involved because there was no time. So that's I understand that, but I hope that's the reason, and that, you know, in future that where there's a little more time that patients can be involved, because they're not, like we said, an added value. They have to be involved from the start. So
super. And Laura, I guess come to you.
It's getting better.
concluding remarks.
No, it's so great to hear from Francesca and know that, you know, there's so many. This is a belief that is across the whatever country you're in.
Yeah.
Actually, recently in Ireland, one of our main state funding bodies for research did a survey of researchers to ask them what their understanding of patient involvement in research was, and what was the barriers to it. And what came out was there's a huge appetite for researchers to embed the patient perspective. There's just a hesitancy because it's so different to what they've been trained to do.
Yeah.
And they don't know where to start. So I do think it just gives me more confidence that working in a patient organization, we're on the right path. So we're training researchers, we're training clinicians, and we're training patients to be part of this process.
Yes.
And to be inclusive to all patients. So it's not just the patients who shout the loudest. Yeah. It's patients across, be they live in rural Ireland, in the city, be they old, young, it's including everyone in the discussions.
That's right. Wonderful. Right. And it is with that great ending, I would like to thank you both for your time today.
Thank you.
You at home for listening or watching, and my great ProQR digital colleagues for making and helping this run so smoothly. I know from my perspective, I've learned a lot. This was Why is it the Patient Perspective in Research Important? Featuring Francesca Diodati and Laura Brady. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.